Hello, everybody. Bienvenido. Welcome. Very grateful to have this time together, to take a break, to make a space that is beautiful and enlightening and amnoetic, reflective and insightful, perhaps in the spirit of the light of the sun or the moon or the sky on living waters here on earth. This is one of the most profound figures of likeness, similarity, similitude for our own minds, which do not have a simple, graspable, or capturable in language, description, analysis nature. Their nature is not like physical objects, and the mind is unimaginably rich with potential and beauty and danger and blindness and forgetting, recollection, resurrection, implication, decision. And one of the reasons or features of mind, which I'm using a word to point at something that is inconceivable, and partly why it is inconceivable is that although it is not alone in the faculties with which we conceive, our souls, our hearts, the lineages to which we belong, the living world, the sky, the sun and moon and planets and stars, time, space, herself, and the dweller in the between. All of these are aspects of our nature, and they work synergistically. The mind, uncapturable in language, is can be understood as a kind of array of possible mirrors or windows, mirrors and windows, beings, spirit, love, emotion. So there's no way to capture the natures of the mind, infinite and beyond conception, for it is that with which we conceive. Perhaps it is not, I do not think it is impossible to, for example, see one's own seeing. But this is a very unusual situation, for we see with seeing. And so it is with our minds. We know and sense and attempt to understand and delve and quest and discover with the many features or elements or essences that we encompass with this one term, thereby deceiving ourselves into thinking we know what we're talking about. Myself included. I am a human, and though I've been blessed and cursed with some, modicum of insight in my life, I am subject to all of the failings common to ordinary humans, especially to the degree that I am not aware of them, or that I do not do something other than acquiesce to them. I had many different ideas of what I might pursue today. But I think I know which direction I will travel in. Before I begin, however, I want to encourage you to pursue with passionate curiosity, wonder, awe, desire, and awareness, deep awareness, quests that you believe in. This has always been an aspect of my nature since childhood. And in fact, most of what we call play is actually the questing, can be at least understood as the questing orientation that is natural to living beings and human beings. And, in our modernity, inundated as we are with representations, images, media primarily influenced and distorted and remade in the image of machines and by machines. We are in great danger here. These situations attack the bases of human awareness, motivation, compassion, empathy, intelligence, insight, desire, and they almost universally, their effect is deleterious. We would want to avoid it completely, to whatever degree we may be able to do so. The source I most deeply trust for knowledge and understanding, intelligence and awareness is what we point at with the word nature. That which is, they who are. Beauty, virtue, love, origin. The living beings themselves, the living places themselves, the sun himself, the moon herself, the world as she is. And all of these aspects are directly desirous of our intimacy with them. This is the deepest core of our essence as living beings, as incarnate beings. So I want to encourage you to forge little quests. And the reason that I say little, of course, vast quests are also important. But you want to cut your teeth on very small things. And so the suggestion that I will make is, there are two suggestions. One is simply go out into the world or the living places with a deeply held, loving, and creative intention to find something that you can affect in such a way as to bring healing, rescue, love, anamnesis, unforgetting, intimacy, to a little situation. It could be you are walking along, as I often am, here, and I may see an earthworm or another small creature in the path, and generally, on the pavement. And generally, these creatures are at great risk, or they have already been injured by monumentally huge humans who are generally unaware of them, largely unaware of them. They can be crushed. So, often I will just move them to what seems to me to be a better position. Now, there's a feature of this that is important to remain aware of, which is that in our desire to be of aid, we can often be blind. And I have experienced this very painfully on a number of occasions where I felt that I understood what would be helpful to this creature or being, but by intervening, either caused its death or further harm. In order to quest, we must be willing to make mistakes, and to, quote, get it wrong, unquote. But if you maintain awareness and feel your inner intelligence, right, and feel your non-ordinary awareness and senses, this will guide you well. And generally you have an aspect within you which is not your thinking mind. And it is not merely your heart or merely any faculty alone, though I would associate it with the soul or our spirit, or the 9 aspects of the soul, as understood by the ancient Egyptians and some moderns, like Normandy Ellis and her cohort, and many others. But yes, you have a guidance system, an array of compasses that again synergize, and so you can sense much more deeply than your thinking could ever possibly sense the nature, potentials, possibility space, dangers, and concerns that orbit your desire to be of aid to other beings. The most natural and beautiful desire in many ways. A most natural and beautiful desire. So yeah, this is one suggestion. Another is, if you live in a city, create a little incident of wonder and art and creativity, right? This could be changing a sign or placing some very tiny diorama in a space that is otherwise devoid of creative art. Or it could be you playing a character for 20 minutes in front of, on a corner or in front of a shop. Become your creativity, embody and enact your creativity in the world for the sake of beauty, and to pierce the veil of the constructed, concrete cages that we so often traverse like hamsters in our minds and lives. Divert the root of expectation toward beauty and play and creativity with some small act, and practice this over time. I think you will find that your questing nature will be nourished and resurrected and joyful as you play more at being not merely human, but all of the space beyond the merely human that belongs to our essence, origin, and nature. So, that said, I have been a questing person, and I think in my late teens, early adulthood, when I was playing Dungeons and Dragons, RuneQuest, Arduin, Call of Cthulhu, Traveler, Champions, think. We were doing sandbox, miniature, military engagements and replaying naval engagements and tank engagements from World War II on the carpet and Star Trek miniature battles, and oh my goodness, what a rich and amazing, nourishing and liberating experience this was. So much more compelling than almost any other easily accessible experience then. Much of this has been replaced by video games, which actually suck, particularly RPGs. The whole idea of an RPG is to encounter novelty, right? And nearly all the video games have zero novelty. You will encounter the same creatures at the same level, the same situations over and over again. There's no novelty. There's no... The whole spirit of, role-playing games has to do with randomness, the unexpected, and the spirit of the video games is precisely the opposite of this. How confusing and bizarre and unexpectable. In any case, these were some of my first experiences at playing, at questing, right? Because the adventure or the campaign or whatever it was we were up to was exciting and novel and enticing and compelling. And there are aspects of this that are dangerous, but not as dangerous as many of the other things that we do instead. So, questing, yes. When I was little, I had many desires for my future, a few of which have become realized, but some. I wanted to be a spaceman. I wanted to be a paleontologist. I wanted to be very deeply, I wanted to be a singer. Yeah, I wanted to sing. And so I used to sing a lot to radio songs, and sometimes later LPs. We didn't have a stereo in the beginning. We had a television. Not in the very beginning we didn't, but eventually we had a television and a radio. Later we would have a stereo. This was in the 60s. I'll tell you a secret in case you don't know it. For most of us, up until around 30, 35, mid-30s, life certainly feels and seems eternal. And there's this idea that time goes faster as you get older. Something much more complex than that is at play. The nature of time is nothing like we imagine. And it can be discovered and interacted with in ways that are extremely profound and inconceivable to those who have not explored them directly. But today's talk is only marginally about time. But so I will say two things that I think are important. First is that you have instars. Right, these are life phases. And the ancient humans were well aware of this. The moderns know very little of it. They just have a few. Child, teen, young adult, adult, midlife, elderly, something like this. These are blinding and confused. You have instars, so you are being... It is as if you are going through multiple incarnations in a single incarnation. And many of us get stuck in the first one or the second or the third. There is no specific number of them. But a model you can use that is useful is 7 or 9. Right? And you will undergo deaths and rebirths. You will undergo the liminal crossing of life phases, unique to you and your lineage and your situations. So be aware of this. look into this matter for yourself. I encourage you. The human knowledge around it is mostly garbage, with some amazing exceptions, but they're very rare. I don't know if I've come across anyone who speaks intelligently about this matter. And by intelligently, I mean deeply, truthfully, or not truthfully, but veritably, credibly, insightfully. Yeah. This is not a single life that you have. You are told this, it is a lie. You can have many lives in this life. You will have many lives in this life unless you get stuck. Right? So be aware of this, and this is part of your quest as a being, in my view. Also, take what you find useful from what I'm saying and leave the rest aside. I'm not trying to convince you of anything, though my language may be inordinately emphatic. What was the second one? We have life phases. Perhaps it will come to me. So there are some pursuits that humans can engage in that are inherently virtuous or beautiful, trustworthy. Not in the sense of being right, but in the sense of being better than most of the other options, right? Seek these. Seek these. Serving other beings, living beings, feeding them, caring for them is very powerful. Not because one expects rewards, but because this is one's nature to do so. I have a friend who I'll call LB, and she cares for animals. She's a very wise spirit. Perhaps she is listening. Of the people that I have come across in the electrosphere, she stands out rather dramatically as a beautiful spirit and heart, and an extremely unusually insightful and intelligent, awake, aware person. I'm very grateful to have her in my orbits, however peripherally that may be. She's also one of the few people whose posts actually have content that is really deeply worth reflecting on, that I know. There are some. I'll also sing the praises. Perhaps it's better I don't. Yeah. See, this is a moment, right, where I'm using the senses I was speaking about, to try to see if a direction of action is good and sensible. And my inner spirit said, you should do another thing, not this one, this time. Another time it might speak differently. You see, there aren't just things that are good and bad. The situation contextually transforms what we might think of. Our thinking is very limited, as intrinsically good or bad. Right? This is a hypothetical kind of thinking. And where it's not extremely useful, it's very dangerous, because we are inclined to replace actual experience with the results of our hypothetical thinking, and then engage in actions which are against our nature or spirit or life path, because we have previously worked them out. We think we have figured out what's going on. Okay. Think about the incredibly strange experience of driving a car, which is a kind of a quest, always, right? Think about how there are rules. There are principles that are wise and will largely protect you. But in a situation where high novelty suddenly intrudes, you cannot rely on the rules. The rules are wildly incomplete in their capacity to determine beneficially your actions. Okay? The rules are an instructuring prosthesis, very useful. Okay? But if you had to rely on them alone, you would fail. The space outside the rules, dangerous though it may sometimes be, and deceptive sometimes, is where our true being dwells. But there are some kinds of things that are inherently virtuous and beautiful. I've always been fascinated with riddles, the deep questions about nature, life, being. And questing. And one of my quests, since I was very little, has involved music. My father played the guitar, and he could sing somewhat. His mother was a very skillful singer. Named after angels. May long her spirit prosper. So he played the guitar, and when I was pretty little, he got me one. It was impossible to play it. It was just, I was not made for this, it seemed. And then in my teens, when I became fascinated with rock music, although I had heard quite a bit of it on the radio, one of the first record albums that I ever received, I wonder what year this was. It was maybe 11 or 12. And I was given an LP. Okay, so I had some LPs before that. I had Sugar Sugar. Oh gosh, so many things now come to mind. There were these old Disney albums of like Treasure Island dramatic presentations. And I had some recordings by Bobby Darin and some 45s and stuff. But the first rock album that I ever remember having, Paul Revere and the Raiders was very important to me. My mom had dated someone in that band in Oregon prior to meeting my father. But this is, I'm getting trapped in memories here. Not trapped, but sidetracked. So one of the first albums that I got that was really like rock was Toys in the Attic by Aerosmith. And I think my mother talked to my grandmother, her mother, into getting it for me, or perhaps bought it, my mom bought it, and then, said this is from Grandma. Oh wow, there's the bone that I saw the dog chewing on yesterday. Oh, wow.
幾千蚊，而家我哋得咗。Wow! How did you find out he had 9 different kinds of terriers?
Oh my goodness. So, in my teens, this would be in the 70s, I became an inveterate air guitarist. Right? So I was just absolutely compelled by this game, this way of playing and exploring who I might become. But I did not really pick up the guitar until, as a runaway, in one part of that adventure. So I ran away on my 14th birthday, and I went into the Russian River area. But my mother and grandmother sort of conspired to get me into this astonishingly unusual hippie school in Grayton, really, I think, that might have been said that it was in Sebastopol. It was called Nonsuch. And I was the only boy anywhere near my age group, so I was 14, I think. And the nearest boy to my age group was probably 9 or 10, maybe 11 or 12, and there were no others. And there were, there was probably 15 girls, ranging in age from 11 to 19, and almost all of them played the guitar, and there were guitars there, acoustic guitars primarily. And it was at Nonsuch that I began to play the guitar. Oh my goodness. What a magical and profound and transformational experience this was for me. The girls mostly played folk songs and some rock tunes. And part of what inspired me was that it was, first of all, just being surrounded by it, right? And this is going to sound, chauvinistic. Let it sound as it does. But part of me was like, well, if all these girls can play the guitar, I must be capable of it. And I can do what they can do. And this is part of how it began. I remember one of the teachers teaching me very gently and playfully, right, just at random. We were sitting in one of the rooms in the old Victorian house that was Nonsuch School. And there was a guitar on the wall, and he had seen that I had begun playing a little bit, and he taught me how to tune the guitar. But it wasn't like I was in a class. It was like we were having, we were just kind of hanging out, and he said, he said, you can learn to tune this. Would you like to try? And he taught me how to tune it. And later, though I was a runaway, I was in touch with my parents. My father sent me that old guitar that he had purchased for me when I was, 5 or something. And I played that guitar as a runaway. I played it, I hitchhiked all over the place in the Russian River, and I played it in people's cars. I would play them songs. I carried it with me. I played it everywhere. And I played it until the wood that connected the body to the face wore out. And then one day I it's actually unfortunate, I think, but in the spirit of rebellion and sometimes the destructiveness of our teenage years, I sort of Jimi Hendrix, smashed it. Because it seemed that it was falling apart, and it was an inexpensive guitar, but it was sentimentally profound. So I became a guitar player, though a very naive one, a very intuitive one, largely untrained. It was so difficult in the beginning. I think one of the things that really helped me was the first electric guitar I got. I grew a small amount of a certain substance, which is unfortunately too popular these days. And I traded some of that for my first electric guitar. It was a Seville. I got it from a guy named Ken Sugarman, who was a rock musician that sometimes visited Nonsuch. And that made it so much easier, right, to play. The acoustic guitars require a very different muscular, if you want the extremity of this, try to play the violin. But for guitars, it's very, very challenging in the beginning to play chords. to get one's hand into this bizarre, seemingly at first impossible situation where one can traverse the possibility space of a stringed instrument. And each instrument has its unique difficulties. But the electric made it possible to, for example, hold a bar chord where with your index finger you hold down all 6 strings, and then with the remaining 3 fingers you toward the saddle where the strings meet the body for right-handed players on the right side of the guitar, you form a fingering pattern. And so none of this is crucially important and is not really where I'm going, but this changed my world forever. To play the guitar was an ecstasy, a magic, something I had long felt was impossible and deeply, passionately desired to do. And whenever I saw someone playing the guitar skillfully, it was like it was like a miracle, right? It just seemed so captivating and non-ordinary. Am I in a dream? What is this? And also, one of the most beautiful and in many ways virtuous things that a human being can do, sort of arbitrarily at any time in any place. And so I had the adventure of becoming a musician. In my own strange way. And I thank everything that blesses my life for this. Everyone who blesses my life for this. For without this, I just don't know how I could be human. I think music is fundamental to our humanity. And probably for most of human history, we always made it together. Another great landmark, and my goodness, did I wrestle with this. Another landmark, but much more recent, circa 2018. My dear friend, and what a brilliant soul he is, Ryan Firstdiver, so Blackfoot Beaverman, previously Ryan Heavyhead. He came, we finally met after many years of being very close friends, we met. And he transferred to me an Aniskin, which is often the first transfer that one receives in their way of life. And along with the Aniskim, he transferred to me the song that goes with it. My God, how I wrestled with that thing, because I had to learn it. Right? I had to learn to sing it. But it is nothing like the music with which we are familiar. It is almost an entirely different kind of experience or activity. It is so estranged from one's, my expectations as somebody, as a Western, colonized and colonizing people, that it was very, very challenging for me to learn it, even though it's fairly short. It takes maybe 2 minutes to sing the Aniskim song. And so I did, what Darren always does. I sat down and broke it out, counted the beats, and wrote down the vocalization patterns, and that didn't help me. Well, eventually it did. And it took me so long. It took like 2 or 3 hours of very careful, again and again and again working to sort of transcribe this. I thought I would use this transcription to learn it. But that is the wrong way to learn such a thing. It worked eventually, but the right way to learn it is to simply sing along with it, over and over and over again. A much better way. What's this? Yes, it was so unlike anything I'd ever encountered. Indigenous songs, they are very different from our expectations and experience of music, unless it is common that we have heard such things. What an incredible gift. Oh, what a beautiful gift. I honor these people, their living places, their lineages. What a precious gift I was given that day. I have another recording. It's funny, the last time I tried to make a recording about music, I was in Stockton. My father had passed away, and I was making a recording at night, and I was doing what I usually do, which is circumambulation. Right, I walk around some place, and I circle the place. Right now I'm circling the lake. But there was nowhere to circle there except streets that I could find near the house. So I was walking around Atlantis Circle at night, speaking very, oh my goodness, that recording was becoming amazing about music. And my dear departed friend William Sawyer, who took his life 2 Augusts ago, I had been speaking with him on the phone earlier and one of his friends. And his friend had been telling me of a situation where he got into combat on the street because he was listening to his, he had his earphones in for his smartphone. He wasn't paying attention, and he was accosted by some thieves. It was very dangerous. He managed to prevail, and I had heard this story, and it took me aback. So I was a little bit nervous, and I was circling Atlanta Circle, and I saw some guy come out of his house. It was sort of dark, and he looked at me very suspiciously, and I couldn't tell, what is he doing? He was like, I don't know, 100 feet away from me, but it was dark. And then he looked at in his hand, and then he turned and went somewhere else, and so went back across the street. And so I stopped making my recording, and I took my earpods out and continued to walk, and I just thought, I'll walk somewhere else. This is dangerous. And then this car rolled up on me, and I had met these people previously, and they started interrogating me. Who are you? You live around here? Where are you from? And I was very nervous when they rolled up on me. And I think it was intuitively obvious to me that they had guns. Okay? They seemed friendly enough, and they were relatively clean-cut folk. A girl was driving, and there were 2 males. And they had clearly seen me on their cam, circling the block, and they saw me, and when they saw me the second time, they became suspicious. And once someone becomes suspicious, it's very difficult to... How I responded to their questions certainly did not help. So that recording got effectively ruined. I tried to make it again later in the night. That was a weird and troubling adventure. When I was making it again, the cops rolled up on me. Even though the people they followed me home and saw that I was living there. I went in a house. They still called the cops, and then the cops rolled up and interrogated me. And oh God, what a fucking typical Stockton mess. There was nothing. The only thing in my mind was to sing the praises of music and reflect on how profound it had been. or is, and all of the different ways of understanding its profundity in our lives. Now, of course, many of you will think, well, I am not a musician, but unless you are mute, unless you cannot speak, and I suspect that my listener group is so small that there are probably no mute people in my audience, but if there are, please, by all means, let me know. But unless you cannot speak, you are a musician. Listen to the sound of my voice, and hear the transformation of prosody and rhythm, articulation and tone. So our speech is fundamentally musical. And I think for most of human history, all of us, we made music together very frequently. It was an integral aspect of our way of being human, primordial. This is one of the core features of being a human being. But all of you who speak, you are musicians. And you can develop the capacity to make your voice, your speaking beautiful and comforting and inspiring and profound. I was blessed with a pleasant voice, but during some challenges that I had faced, and in many ways still face, I learned much more about how to speak beautifully. So we are all musicians. But the thing I wanted, so now, I have no idea how long I've been talking, but the thing that I wanted to speak of today is that I always held formally trained musicians in a kind of terrified reverence. These people who could sight sing and sight read and interpret the written forms of music. Oh my God, I just felt like this is a bridge too far. It's too holy for me. I will never be able to do this. And particularly, I've been fascinated, although nearly every instrument, I love them. And I am very much a guitar player. But as a guitar player, depending on how you approach the instrument and your experience and the contexts in which you play and so forth, you're generally understood, to be a second-class citizen. I've got a bunch of ravens are here with me now. I love them. They are very musical. You'll find the musics of nature are very powerful. In the corvids, the young birds have a very different tonality. In the life phase, in nature, life phase is obvious, right? Although the demarcations, not so much. But the corvids, the crows, ravens, magpies, blue jays. There's another one I recently discovered I did not know was a corvid, but I can't recall what it is. In any case, the young birds have this sort of plaintive voice, and when they become adults, it changes dramatically. Now it is sort of a thunder power. Very powerful. So, guitar players are often kind of seen as second-class citizens, right? Particularly, violinists and people who have to play with an awareness of intonation. The violin, of course, and the cello and the viola and so forth, they have no frets. So, they're like, one can see a guitar player as, like the stringed instrument version of somebody who is playing a stringed instrument with training wheels, right? Because we have frets. Yeah. So you don't learn. You generally, unless you're a classical guitarist, you will not learn about intonation because the fret sort of takes care of it. And this is a very profound thing. Much of modernity is like this. They give you training wheels and call this liberation. But those training wheels restrict the depth of your intimacies with what's going on. So, when I was younger, in my 20s, I studied music a bit formally, and this is a big deal for me. I learned music theory, and I learned to read a little bit for the guitar and a little bit for the piano, or for keyboards. I had a synthesizer back then, which was an amazing, astonishing thing, a Roland Juno 60. But many years ago, I stopped playing music altogether. This was during a crisis in my life. I got rid of most of my instruments. I stopped. I would occasionally return to the guitar very deeply, and then I would set it aside again. So there were long periods where I didn't make music, and I remember when I got rid of my synthesizers and stuff, mostly because I needed the money to pay the rent. And I dreamed that maybe one day I would be able to approach the piano, but it seemed impossible. And when my father passed away, as I was, engaged in the hell chore of dealing with his very minimal estate, I decided that if I made it through this, that I would endeavor to reacquire, to study music again, sight reading, theory, reading, and hopefully the piano. And I can't have an actual piano where I live, because I live in a flat and it would be too loud for the neighbors upstairs. But, okay, so I need to branch here.
Yeah, I like all the Irish folks.
We live in a time where the concepts from the German language Zeitgeber and Zeitstorer, time giver, synchronization, enhancer, and desynchronization, impediment, these concepts are crucially imperative for us to remain aware of, and so that we can attend that which synchronizes and resynchronizes our rhythmic aspects of our being and lives. And we can avoid those things that desynchronize us. And I was reminded of this by walking past the percussionist, who's just stepped out of his car and is just naturally doing something beautiful in the world, right? As I was recommending earlier. So, about 8 months ago, I had purchased an instrument to study on, and it sat mostly unused for maybe a year, almost a year. And then I began to study. So much I want to share here. When one first attempts a new skill, even though I'm a musician, the piano is extremely different from the guitar in many important ways. But here's what I thought. I thought, I will try to learn to play the piano. And my path with music has always been one that involves composition. Not formal composition, informal composition, but I make up the music. I compose the music that I play, mostly on the guitar. I may learn riffs or a tune here or there. I learned some songs, probably 30 or 40 of them. Rock tunes and Stairway to Heaven and House of the Rising Sun and Shady Grove was one of the first songs I ever learned from the girls at Nonesuch. And also Needle in the Damage Done by Neil Young. And when I was a young teen, I could sing in a very high-pitched voice. I could sing much more highly pitched than maybe even some of the girls. In any case, most of what I do is I create songs or musical pieces. I have very few songs with lyrics for the guitar. Some, maybe 5 or 6, probably written 10, but forgotten most of them. And those are extremely profound for me. There was a phase about 15 years ago where I began to really focus on singing and playing. And I learned to sing some of my songs, and also particularly the song Your Ghost by Kristen Hirsch, and Tracy Chapman's Talking About a Revolution. But then there were some bad things that happened, and I could not continue to sing. So, in any case, when I approached the piano, I thought, I will try to learn this instrument, I will study it, and I will one day compose amazing music on it. Because composition is really my thing. Even if I'm very naive and I don't know anything about music theory or what key is this in, I don't know. Right? I could technically figure it out with some work, but I am a naive musician in this sense. So I began to study theory a bit and approached the piano. And oh my God. So this is the part of my talk where I'm actually getting into with me, you can expect a long preamble, right? A long prelude. But this is the part of my talk where I'm actually getting near the topic that I originally hope to explore. So I started studying primarily finger exercises. If you imagine a sort of an AI-generated image of a musical torture chamber, dark and reddish brown, some subterranean cave trap. You see all of these children and adults, and they're chained to the piano, and there's no light and no food. It's very hot, and it smells like sulfur in there. And blazoning above this AI-generated image is the single name Hanan. All right, these are mechanical exercises. I don't know how many of them there are. A lot. And if you transcribe them into all the keys, a huge lot. But they're just in the key of C, so you are only really studying the white keys when you play Hanan, unless you transpose it. That was the word I meant, not transcribe. So these are mechanical exercises, dun 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 kind of thing, right? And lots of different ones. And you practice them with a metronome. So click, 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 bleep, click, 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 bleep, or whatever. And you're supposed to practice them, I think, at 80 to 108 on the metronome. What is that? Beats per minute, I think? Yeah. BPM. Which is pretty difficult to achieve for a beginner. So I began practicing these. And this is my naive way of thinking I will teach myself how to play the piano. For all of my insight and intelligence, I am just as blind and stupid as the dumbest people, or people who are being dumb can be. And the the contrast, right? It's like on the side of insight, man, I can make that stuff fly. On the side of, what kind of a bone is that? My goodness. Where did that come from? And on the side of like blind idiocy, oh, just as good. I'm just as good at blind idiocy as I am at insight. I tend to go to one extreme or the other. In any case, I'm going to say some things about studying musical instruments that I think are uncommon, and I hope that this part of my recording may get some wide airplay. And feel free to excerpt it if you wish. Just credit me and link it to my channel. So I had no idea what I was signing up for. I thought, I'm going to acquire a new skill. Right? Like, a nerd, which I definitely am nerdy as hell. I will acquire a new skill. I will learn to play the piano and compose music. And one day, I will be like the Phantom of the Opera, or Vincent Price in Dr. Phibes, playing the organ, toccata and fugue in D. One day, I will be an amazing composer and player. Maybe, if I live. But I just thought, I'll study this instrument. And what I did not realize, and what has completely blown me away and continues to ruin everything about my regular thinking, is that when I began to study the piano, I would go into trance. Now, I am capable of generating trance in others. It's actually extremely difficult for me to generate trance in myself. And there are very few things that catalyze trance for me. And one of them is watching Light on Water. But the piano turned out to be very profound in its capacity to generate trance for me, because the synergy of my passionate desire, my diligence, my, like I'm willing to sit down and grind out, an hour and a half of Hanon, and I can hear actual pianists, tearing their hair out and going like, what is this person doing? Or 2 hours of Hanon. Combined with the rhythmic finger motions and the metronome, click, 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 and the metronome that I use is a digital one, so it has like pulsing lights too. This produced a perfect storm in Darren's dumb, naive mind. And what started happening at first is that there were unique sensory phenomena. Trance often is accompanied by this. So like I could hear the pulse click from a location different from where it was coming from. I felt a slight feeling of being sedated or a fuzziness in my awareness. And then memories started bubbling up in my awareness. As I played the piano, as I practiced the Hanon. And this led into a process which is still at play for me, a kind of a life review, right, where I see where I got things wrong, where I was mean or arrogant or selfish or checked out or intoxicated or just, inveterately not being true to my spirit, particularly. And so this linkage arose between playing the piano and this kind of life review process for me. But that wasn't the only thing that happened. Most people approach musical instruments. No, that's not true. Many people in their thinking, myself included, approach musical instruments or making music or learning to make music as a task, right? I will do this thing. And they don't realize necessarily, though some of them, probably all of them have some experience of this, and particularly if they become real musicians, this becomes blatantly obvious for them. The making of music is a spiritual path, or a transcendental path, right? This is a very profound thing that is happening. I remember in the 80s I worked in a store owned by a very bad and mean-spirited man named George Eade. And it was called Stars Music, and it was an offshoot of his store in Petaluma. And I was working for the manager there, who was a brilliant and amazing and heartful and playful soul, Jim Mona, who's still around. I think George has probably passed the veil. George was a profiteer and a domineering, mean-spirited person. But working for Jim was bliss. And there was this kid who used to come in. I was deeply interested in neoclassical metal. I remember the first day I heard Randy Rhoads play, I was like, this is the future of guitar. And, I've written a few pieces of that, in that genre. But this kid used to come in. He was a jock. He was, maybe 16. He had a Charvel, incredibly amazing electric guitar, and he would just shred. And one day he was showing me a new guitar, and he was talking about having been having auditioned. I think he was maybe going to play with Jason Becker, but he mentioned a couple of the top name, neoclassical metal guitar players, and he was showing me this new guitar he'd gotten. Maybe it was a Jackson. It might have also been a Charvel. I'm not sure. And he said, and I think, he could see that I was in awe of him think I have a photograph of him somewhere, a Polaroid. I was astonished at his facility with the instrument. You know, a jock, an athlete, right? He approached the guitar the way that he approached athleticism. So it was about extreme performative skill. And we were outside the store, and he was showing me his new guitar, and he started to tell me something. And I think he trusted that I was the kind of person that could understand this. I don't know if he told many people this story. But he had a portrait of Paganini. And if you want to hear insane violin, listen to the Paganini's Caprices, which are probably the central inspiration of the entire genre of neoclassical metal, Yngwie Malmsteen and so forth. And he said, you know, the other night I was practicing and I was really into it, and I looked up at the portrait of Paganini, of course I'm paraphrasing, and suddenly there was like this light in it, and it came to life, and it seemed as if Paganini stepped out of the portrait and began to shine on me as if I were his student. And he said, you know, this sounds crazy, but what do you think is going on? What is that about? And back then, you know, I was very young. I was like 26 or something. I didn't really know what to make of it. I'm not sure what I said. I know what I would say today. I probably did, though, say something like, look, you are following in the footsteps of this composer. Of course this is true, you know, this happens. But it didn't occur to me when I approached the piano what I was getting into. I did not realize. I was thinking of it as a task. And this is the thing that I don't know, you know, I don't have a teacher, piano teacher, and I don't know if teachers teach this, but it seems that some do. I suspect some would. When you begin to learn a musical instrument, even the voice, if you want to sing, you're joining a lineage, a spirit lineage, that is not just history and the future. It's a superposition over the entire history and future of the instrument and every being who ever played it. Everyone who attempted this seemingly impossible thing. And however far they got with it. And many of the greatest composers and players, we don't know them. There's a whole branch of people who lived and died unknown to us. Prodigies and geniuses that were never discovered or resisted discovery on purpose. So I remember I forged this little toy in my mind. I thought, before I sit down at the piano, I will imagine that I put on the magic gloves. And the magic gloves are the spirit of all the people and the beings, the muses themselves, Mnemosyne, their mother, and all of those people who have ever approached the piano, and the beauty and virtue of their spirit and their passion and their curiosity and their unstoppable desire to become the impossible, to import the impossible into this layer of being where we exist and are incarnate. Now, this is me singing very eloquently. My original toy was much, much more simplistic. But I thought, I will imagine that their hands become my hands. And I still did not realize how profound it could be for me. And, everyone's experience is unique. But I want to make very clear that when you begin to learn a skill, we have this idea of separate personhood. You think like, oh, I am a separate person, I am this person, I am me. This is not true. Or rather, the degree to which it is true is minimal compared to all of the other features that are present and important to tend and be aware of. I did not realize that I was joining a lineage at first, and now I certainly do. I'm going to pause here for a minute. I will return shortly. I am still astonished at the transformations of my life, mind, health, and being that studying the piano has brought forth. Here I thought, this is a task, it is a thing I will do. It did not occur to me that it's in many important ways the other way around. This is something that will happen to me, and it will change me in the core of my heart and being and spirit and mind. There's another feature here, which is, I think modernly we do not realize that we are disinclined to see anyway, that whatever we are doing with our hands, this is what we are doing with our mind, our spirit, our brain, our nervous system, our body, the history and future of our lineages. Anything we do with our hands, particularly, is deeply in structuring or damaging. So we should be very aware of how profound our hands are. This branch of study is called haptics, formally. But I do not mean the formal study of haptics. I mean something very strange and mysterious, magical and profound. All of the things we are doing with our hands. In fact, if you think carefully, you will find that most of the things you do are done with your hands. And also the hands are the part of your body you see most often. They're the part of yourself you are inclined to see most often. Running is a different kind of thing, right? With running, it's your feet and your legs you are very inside of, right? You become your feet and your legs and your lungs, your heart, your blood. But in studying the piano, it is as if I must be cleansed. Like my karma must be cleansed. My history must be cleansed. I cannot be a musician and make beauty if I am filled with, darkness or wrongdoing or sin, if you will, or mistakes. So it is reforging my heart. It is reforging my mind. My dreaming has changed. My health is better. It is synchronizing. And I strongly suspect that although we think our memories are stored in our brain, our hands, right, are very, very important in this matter. So when you take up or play an instrument, there's something very profound going on where the entire lineage of the beings, the muses and the musicians, from whom music arises within us and for and with whom music arises in the world. You join with these ones, right, in a spirit way. And it's very profound. And it's sad that many musicians are not more deeply aware of this matter. I have never heard it discussed. I'm sure it has been. I have just not encountered it. We hear everything about technique and muscle connection and all of these different approaches to study and to practice and so forth. But we do not hear anything about the spirit of the thing, the spirit of the path, the way. And this has become so profound for me. Much to my surprise each time, right? Sometimes late at night I will sit down with my headphones on and play a little bit very gently and very sensitively. And oh my God, so amazing. I think in a sense it is tragic if we don't all participate in music making together. Because this is a profound virtue, right? It's very difficult to sin at the piano, right? To get it really wrong. But my mind is just blown by this. Again, I thought, yeah, well, I'll work on this and I'll become good at it. This is nothing like what's happening. It's working on me, and I am becoming a better human being because it is working on me. I am becoming a better soul, a more beautiful and rich soul and spirit and heart at the feet of the piano, right? It is not, I will subjugate this instrument to my creative will. Quite the opposite. Something very strange is happening. The instrument has enchanted me and is having its way with me very regularly. And in this matter, I am blessed. So it is true with all tasks, though, not just music, but my friend who takes care of her animals. This is a very similar, virtuous and beautiful path, right? To give loving care to other beings might be the most primordial of paths, or at least a very primordial and trustworthy one. So yes, I have I have fallen in love, and there seems to be some love for me as well in this matter. But I just want to be, I want to sing of the unimaginable bliss of these transformations and the difference between what I was thinking when I took this path and what it has become. This is very important. Our thinking, often a very pragmatic sort of mental activity, is extremely deceptive. It naturally disincludes much of our nature's potentials, originary motives, our hearts, and so forth. Yeah. So, these are some of my thoughts for today. When you take up an instrument, you are joining with a lineage, just very similarly as when my dear friend transferred the Aniskim to me. He was joining me to a lineage of beings and histories and futures. What an incredible blessing, treasure, and gift this is, we are, and we can become together. So these are some of my thoughts for today. I'm so grateful to have had the time to share them with you and to still be alive in the strange world of the modern moment. And for all of you who listen and reflect and travel and journey with me. And even for those of you who find me tedious or boring or whatever you may find me that is not likable. One needs a few good critics. So please take a moment, if you will, and like or comment, ask a question, share your own insights, leave a criticism, dream together. with me. And support my channel in whatever way feels natural to you, if there is such a way. I wish you beauty, healing, insight, playful, joyful, creative companionship with other humans and nature, and the fulfillment of the promise of your human incarnation. Thank you for joining me. I look forward to learning together again very soon. Bye-bye for now.